If you are a federal government employee for last year and this year, you probably heard on the news, your friends, or even for yourself, this might affect you about layoff. You're talking about DOGE, right? As a financial advisor working with federal government employees for decades, last year and this has probably been the worst year that I've seen in terms of federal layoffs. So for some reason you probably heard different things, right? You heard VERA, different things. So we're going to be able to tell to you about the implications of those. That way you can make smart and confident choices, right? So let's dive into it, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is VERA. What does VERA basically means is Voluntary Employee Retirement Authority. When you think about VERA, you cannot request VERA yourself, right? This has to come from your agency and with the approval of our OPM. What does it mean? It means that the federal government or your agency is basically telling you that, hey, we want you to retire early. So we're going to give you an incentive, that way you can retire early. What I always like to tell people, if government comes to you to give you an incentive for you to retire early, is it in their best interest or your best interest, right? So you got to think about that first. So number one, there got to be a qualification in there. Okay, so if you think about your full retirement, as a federal government employee, if you are in the newer system, the first system, there are requirements that you need to meet. Number one, you have to meet your minimum retirement age. What does that mean? It depends on when you were born. So for some people, that could start from 55 all the way to 57. So in order for you to retire, you have to meet that minimum retirement age. And the other step that you need to look at, you also have to look at, you have to meet the service requirement age. So your MRA plus 30 years of service, then you are eligible for full retirement. If you don't meet those, then the next step will be you could have 60 years and then 20 years of federal service. Or if you don't meet that, you could do 62 and then 5 years of federal credible service, right? So if you don't meet any of that, so what VERA basically does is it lowers those standards for you. That way you can get out and retire without any penalty. So how do you qualify for VERA? You have to have at least 50, you have to be 50 years or at least 25 years or 20 years of service. So 50 years and then 20 years of service. Or you could be any age with 25 years of service. So if you meet those criteria, you can basically go in to take VERA and then be able to leave or separate from the federal government without any penalty. So typically, if you don't have a VERA and you don't meet the full eligibility requirement, there got to be a penalty that you pay, a 5% penalty each year. So VERA eliminates that 5% penalty in there. But what you have to understand though is when you take VERA, a lot of times we get people come to our office really, really terrified, and I can understand why. Because if you have never done this before, now they put you in this situation, you're terrified about it. Now, why are they worried? One, they will come to us, they have 50 years, they probably have 50 years of service, and then they probably have 25 years of service, okay? Now, they'll come to us and then be like, Momodou, I am terrified, because they think that they're going to lose their pension, they're going to lose their health insurance and all of that because they offered VERA, which is not the case. In this scenario, we'll come to them and talk to them and calm them down to say, well, you do qualify for VERA. What that means is you can go into retirement and then still get your pension. Obviously, it's going to be a reduced amount because your number of years is actually lower now, but you're not going to be able to lose your health insurance. You can carry those into retirement. Now, but that one thing that you have to know though is when you do a VERA, when you go out, typically a federal government employee, when they retire before 62, they get something called the Special Retirement Supplement, okay? Now, when you do the VERA and you retire at 50 years old, well, from 50 to your minimum retirement age, let's say your minimum retirement age is, let's say, for example, 57. So from 50 to 57, you're not going to collect that special retirement supplement. So that's a big gap over there. So now you have to think about where are you going to get that income coming from. That's when people will kind of go get another job to fill in the gap for that. But that special retirement supplement will come in at your full retirement age. So when you get to 57, if that's your full retirement age, then that retirement supplement will kick in until when you get to 62. So that's one catch over there. The other thing that we want to talk about is like your TSP, okay? What does that mean for your TSP before 55? So for a federal government employee, when you retire at age 55 or above that or beyond that, then what do? You can touch your TSP, make a withdrawal from your TSP without a 10% penalty. Typically, if you retire, or if you have an IRA outside and you want to take money out from that IRA, if you're not 59 and a half years old, there's a 10% penalty on that. So if you retire from 55 and above, then you could definitely take that money out without any penalty. But in this scenario, though, since you're basically taking VERA at 50, then there's a challenge over here. There's a problem over here. So if you decide to basically take that TSP out, then that 10% penalty is definitely going to apply on that. So for a lot of federal government employee, that becomes an issue because now that they retired, they need that extra income coming in, or maybe they're looking for a job, the job has not come in yet, or they have not found a job. Then what will happen? They're forced to go into their TSP and then be able to take that withdrawal out. That could basically get you a 10% penalty. Now, we don't want that to happen, right? So this first supplement over here is extremely important for you to understand. And that's why when they offer you a VERA, we want to make sure that you actually call us and sit down with us. That way we can walk you through what are some of the implications before you actually take that. Because sometimes with VERA, it could be very, very quick, right? You don't know when your agency will provide that VERA option to you, and then even if they provide that VERA option to you, sometimes it's like, they want you to, the turnaround would have to be really, really quick. And then if you feel like, hey, you got to be able to give them an answer right away, and without consulting us, then that would probably be an issue with that. You probably would do something that probably can haunt you for the rest of your life. So make sure that you do talk to us about that. Now, your FEHB, which is your health insurance. Well, what's the FEHB rule when it comes to VERA? People typically they will say, okay, well, I'm 50 years old, but I'm not eligible to retire, but they're forcing me out through VERA, or I'm accepting VERA. Does that mean that I'm going to lose my health insurance? Well, that's not the case. You're not losing your health insurance over here. Your health insurance, you're going to carry that going into retirement. So it's not like, you are retiring because you're not eligible to retire. So in normal scenarios, when you're not eligible to retire, and you do retire, there's some sort of like a postponement or deferment in there, but that's not the case over here. You can take your health insurance and you'll be fine in retirement piece. And that's one of the things, that's the biggest issue most people are worried about. That actually keeps them awake at night because they think that they're going to lose their health insurance, the FEHB, which is not usually the case over here. So you want to make sure that before you take your VERA, understand key things. What's the implication of VERA? How is that going to affect your income-wise? Meaning that are you going to be able to have enough pension coming in? Because now your pension is going to be lower because your number of years in service is actually going to be lower now. So you're going to have a lower pension now. Now the other thing is how you're going to supplement that, because now you don't have that special retirement supplement until your minimum retirement age. So how do you get that extra income coming in? That's a big issue. So we're going to make sure that we can verify that for you and be able to put a plan in place so that you can fill that gap. And then how do you fill that gap? Well, also at that point, you're not even eligible for Social Security. Okay? So no retirement supplement, no Social Security because you're not eligible. Well, what's the only fallback? For most people, their TSP is the fallback. So that's why we want to make sure that you come in and sit with us and then be able to walk you through so that we can put you on a plan and then show you what your withdrawal strategy is going to look like. Because at that point, you're going to have to get some income coming in to be able to pay your bills until you get your next job. Or maybe if you don't have another job, to say like that into retirement. You want to make sure that you have enough money going in. Now, the other thing that we have to think about is if you have a TSP and if all of your money is sitting in the TSP traditional, then now what happens? You have to take money out as a distribution, and is that going to be taxed? Absolutely, that's going to be taxed. And at what rate? We don't know. That's going to depend on at that particular point that year how much income did you bring in, right? So your income could be as high as up to, your tax rate could be as high as up to 37, or it could be lower than that, right? So that's why that tax planning is very, very important in there. So just a rundown in terms of like, your benefits in terms of when you're going to retire. If they offer you VERA, whatever situation is, make sure that you do come to us. That way we can demystify this for you, and that way you can make smart and confident choices and then be able to retire happily ever after. So if you're a federal government employee and you see some value in here, please subscribe to this channel, because this is where we post relevant information so that you can take and then be able to act on them so that you can profoundly change your retirement. So until then, I'll see you next time. Bye.